I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the Idaho Student Murders. 4 students living in an off-campus house stabbed to death in the middle of the night. It's the most anticipated trial on Court TV's docket, a case the nation is waiting to see. Here's the story. In the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students were stabbed to death inside their off-campus residence. Ethan, Xana, Maddie, and Kaylee all gone. The brutal crime shook the community and touched the nation, setting off an intense manhunt for a killer. Investigators from the Moscow Police Department joined forces with the Idaho State Police and the FBI, following every lead, every tip, and every piece of evidence. That investigation took them across the country to Pennsylvania and led them to this man, a grad student at a neighboring university. This man, now accused of being a mass murderer, responsible for one of the most notorious crimes on our docket. Despite the arrest, very little information has been made public, and there are many questions still left unanswered about the brutal quadruple murder. This is such a horrific story. I remember when the story first broke, you're trying to figure, what happened here? Was it some sort of fight? Was it some sort of jealous rage? And now we understand that they believe is a madman, psychotic killer who did this. I want to read from the affidavit from the case. This is the statement of Brett Payne, who's from the Moscow Police Department, and provides some important information here. Both Gonzalez and Mogan were deceased with visible stab wounds. I also later noticed what appeared to be a tan leather knife sheath laying on the bed next to Mogan's right side. That's Maddie's right side. The Idaho State Lab later located a single source of male DNA, suspect profile, left on the button snap of the knife sheath. Now, I have with me right now the same type of knife. This is a K-bar, and this is the little snap button right here on top. So if you have the knife, this is how you would release the knife. You've got to snap this open. And this is where they say they found the DNA, right on this very small little snap. That was it. Now, the knife sheath, I can't imagine that it was left there on purpose. It has a loop on it, so would you put it around your belt normally? Was this a mistake? Was this done on purpose? Some sick way that he wanted to perhaps get caught? I don't know. But this is the crucial piece of evidence, the DNA left on the snap button on this knife sheath. Now, the knife has never been found. It was just the sheath that holds the knife that they believe is, in fact, the murder weapon in this case. So that brings us to our first question in this investigation. How was the suspected killer linked to the knife sheath? Right? You've got the DNA from the knife sheath, but how do you connect that to the suspect? Joining me to help us work through all of this, former homicide detective and host of the Interview Room with Chris McDonough. Chris McDonough is with us, and also joining us, laboratory director for Pure Gold Forensics. She has more than 20 years of experience in DNA analysis, forensic DNA expert, Susanna Ryan. Great to have both of you here. Let me give you one more piece of information that I think is crucial here. Again, from the affidavit. On December 27th, 2022, so a little more than a month after the quadruple murders, Pennsylvania agents recovered the trash from the Kohberger family residence located in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. A DNA profile obtained from the trash and the DNA profile obtained from the knife sheath identified a male as not being excluded as the biological father of the suspect profile. At least 99.9998% of the male population would be expected to be excluded from the possibility of being the suspect's biological father. All right, Chris McDonough, I'm going to begin with you in the collection of this trash and how an operation like that works, and what are some of the obstacles involved with that?
Sure, Vinny. Well, first of all, if it's trash, then it's considered under the law abandoned property. So anybody could just go up and grab it at any time, and that's what the feds did. They were on a surveillance up there in Pennsylvania watching the house because they had additional information from the lab that says, hey, we may have some DNA material and it's pointing this way. And so they set up on that house and grabbed that trash when they had the opportunity.
All right, Susanna Ryan, let's talk about the process now of going from a piece of trash to making a match. Physically, what has to be done here?
Right, so when we get items from a trash pull, the problem is we don't know who has touched or contacted those items. And so one of the things that we need to do is just start testing multiple items. And in this case, I'm sure that the hope was that they would get a direct match to Bryan Kohberger, but the next best thing was a match to someone that could not be excluded as his biological father.
So when you're examining trash, like in a lot of these DNA cases that we have, we're always talking about bodily fluids. If it's a rape case, we know where the DNA is going to come from. If it's a case involving blood, it's obvious, right? A blood stain. But if you're going through trash, how do you find or try to extract DNA from trash?
Right. So the best thing could be something like a water bottle, some sort of drink container, where we do have an expectation of seeing the perpetrator or the suspect leaving their DNA through saliva on that item. But, you know, I've had some pretty interesting items that I've tested, medical devices and Band-Aids and just anything where someone, you have a reasonable expectation that your person of interest contacted it, that they were the only one that touched it, that they themselves maybe licked a stamp or envelope or, something like that, where you're hoping to get that person's DNA to do a direct comparison. And again, I have had cases like this where we've had to do basically what we call a reverse paternity. So we have this DNA on the item of evidence. It's unknown. We don't know whose it is. Now we get someone else's DNA from a trash pull, and it's an exclusion. We know it's not that person, but we can tell through the DNA analysis that there's a close match. And so in this case, probably was the father.
Are you shocked they were able to extract DNA from something like this, a snap button on a knife sheath, Susanna?
Not at all. We do it every day. It's pretty amazing the things that we can get DNA from when you consider that people are constantly leaving their DNA behind. Just being, physically being in a location, you're leaving your DNA behind. So nowadays we can get DNA from a couple of cells worth of DNA. That's all we need.
Chris, I want to put something else that just came through on a defense filing. We're learning a little bit more about what happened. And I want to get your reaction as a homicide investigator. On December 30th, 2022, 1:14 a.m., Pennsylvania SWAT raided the suspect's parents' home. During the raid, law enforcement broke the front door of the home, shattered the sliding glass door of the basement, and held the entire family at gunpoint, and then seized the defendant. That's when they're making the arrest on December 30th. Then at 4 a.m., Pennsylvania State Police filed a criminal complaint against the suspect. Agents searched his person, took his fingerprints, pictures of his body, and a DNA swab was taken from him. So, Chris, are you shocked at the way the arrest went down at 1:14 a.m.? The defense is complaining about this. Smashing, holding him at gunpoint. What are your thoughts about the way that went down?
Not at all, Vinny. I mean, he's lucky to have a front door. based on the totality of the circumstances here, officer safety is going to be at the top of that, pile. So they don't know what they're dealing with. They obviously feel that he was a top priority suspect. At that point, they didn't know if he was armed, if he was going to be armed inside of his house or his parents' house there. So quite frankly, the fact that they came through the front door, I've been on, arrest warrants where the SWAT guys go in and they literally just hook a chain to the front door and pull it off the hinges, and then they go in with a flashbang and they take everybody to the ground. So I think this was quite reasonable, to be honest with you.
All right, Susanna, so after they make that arrest, they do the swab of the suspect and they say they have matched it. Looking at the way the DNA was gathered in this case, from the snap, from the swab, from the garbage, do you see any potential problems for prosecutors in this case related to the DNA? Because I think we all agree, if this stuff stands up, this is the most compelling evidence linking this defendant to the crime scene.
So assuming that the testing was done properly, then I don't think there's an issue necessarily with the fact that the DNA is consistent with Kohberger. I would say my issue would be, well, this is a movable object. So yes, maybe his DNA is present on this item, but that doesn't necessarily automatically correlate to him having committed the murders, right? So I think it's an important piece of evidence. But to me, I think that some of the other circumstantial evidence is going to help bolster this physical evidence, because they don't seem to have Kohberger's DNA, directly on the victim's body, or a blood stain, or a fingerprint in that house. They have this, but the argument could be made that that knife sheath was left there by someone else, by the true killer.
Oh, I'm sure we will hear that. Big thanks to Susanna Ryan, Chris McDonough, thanks as well. Coming up next, does the death penalty make this case easier or more difficult?
Under Idaho law, the method of execution is lethal injection, and if unavailable, then the firing squad.
Coming soon to Court TV.
It's the biggest story that we're covering.
He is the boogeyman.
Lori Daybell.
She said, I will have you destroyed.
She's got another murder trial coming up.
A social media sensation, now a suspected killer.
We will not stop fighting. We have no quit.
Sean Diddy Combs arrested on a federal indictment.
The high-stakes trials you don't want to miss. Coming soon. Only on Court TV.
Come.
We think that the court ought to strike the death penalty in this case and not allow the case to go forward as a death penalty case, because Idaho does not have a current means of executing anybody. When somebody sits on death row and there's no real means of executing them, that is dehumanizing to that person. That's similar.
Say there's no means. Under Idaho law, the method of execution is lethal injection, and if unavailable, then the firing squad.
The defense trying a lot, like making many motions, trying to figure out a way to have the death penalty off of this case. So the suspected Idaho student killer does not face the death penalty. I've got the ruling from the judge. This is the judge's order. Before the court, I told you, are 12 motions filed by defendant challenging various aspects of Idaho's capital punishment scheme. The court concludes relief in the defendant's favor is not warranted on any of the motions. Based on the foregoing analysis, defendant's death penalty motions are hereby denied. Judge Hippler. So it remains a death penalty case. And we cover a lot of death penalty cases here on Court TV, and we have these discussions all the time. And many times I hear from criminal defense attorneys, and I take it with a grain of salt because they're criminal defense attorneys and they have their position. None of them believe in the death penalty. But they always say it makes it more difficult for prosecutors. when it's a death penalty case? And I was thinking about that for this case, and it brings me to my next question. Does the death penalty make this case easier or more difficult for the prosecution? I think there's arguments on both sides. But does that make this a more difficult case for prosecutors because it is a death penalty case, despite the fact that the defense was trying to get that eliminated for obvious reasons? Joining me, an attorney who was involved in another high-profile death penalty case in Idaho, representing Chad Daybell. John Pryor is with us. John, great to see you. Let me ask you, what are your thoughts about that? The fact that this is a death penalty case, does it make it more difficult for prosecutors, whether it's in the initial prosecution or just in the way the case will progress from beginning all the way to the end?
Well, Vinnie, you noted that the criminal defense attorneys generally tell you that including the death penalty is going to make it more difficult. But the nature of this case and the allegations are pretty egregious. And I think that having the death penalty on this case makes it easier for the prosecution.
Explain to me why, John.
Well, I think it's because in order to get the death penalty in Idaho, there have to be aggravating factors. And in Idaho, you only need one aggravating factor. And there's a long list of aggravating factors in Idaho that qualify for someone to get the death penalty. And if the jury comes back and says one of the aggravating factors applies, they can vote to give the death penalty. Utter disregard for human life, cruel, outrageous, atrocious conduct. That's another one. In this particular case, we're talking about 4 college students, from what I gathered, who were by someone were brutally stabbed and killed. I think under that circumstance, the 3 or 4 aggravating factors that qualify for this being outrageous, atrocious, total disregard for human life, I think that would qualify. I think in this instance, it's a no-brainer for the prosecutor to pursue the death penalty in this particular case.
And joining our conversation right now by phone, the defense attorney who represented Andrea Yates, George Parnham, is with us. George, great to catch up with you. It's been a long, long time.
Yes, it has.
Let me ask you, from your perspective, do you think when the death penalty is now in the mix in a high-profile murder case, does it make it more difficult or easier for prosecutors?
I think certainly from my perspective as a defense lawyer, I think it's more difficult for the government or the state as far as the merits of the prosecution is concerned. Remember that be it judge or jury, this is the ultimate decision, and it's going to weigh very heavily on the fact finder or the judge or jury that makes the determination. So I think it's more difficult and harder on the prosecution. I've had death penalty cases, and certainly at least in Texas, we have individual voir dire where the individual prospective juror will take the stand outside the hearing of the other prospective jurors and be questioned by the state as well as the defense to determine whether or not the individual has any bias or prejudice for or against the penalty of death. But I think the very essence of the ultimate decision, taking a life, has got to play so heavily on the mindset of the judge or jury that it obviously I think weighs very heavily on the state or the prosecuting authorities to get a death penalty case. Jurors This is, as I said, the ultimate decision. And nobody wants to sit on a jury, at least based on my experience, where they have to make a determination.
Oh, it's
regardless
tough.
of the egregious nature.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tough job. John Pryor, let me ask you about in Idaho. It's going to be in Ada County. It's going to be in Boise. What are your thoughts about, the population there and their thoughts about the death penalty?
Well, I respectfully to George, I don't think it's as big of a burden for the state in Idaho as Mr. Parham would suggest. In this particular case, this was a very high-profile, it is a very high-profile murder case. Terrible fact pattern, terrible circumstances, and when you're picking a death penalty jury, the reality is that the vast majority of the folks who were interviewed for when you're deciding and picking a jury will tell you that either they're in favor of the jury or in favor of the death penalty, or they're strongly in favor of the death penalty. And it's the exception, at least my experience is it's the exception that you get someone that says, I'm strongly opposed or I'm opposed to the death penalty. And when you're dealing with the circumstances like Kohberger, where there are 4 college students who, from the facts I have, were brutally murdered by someone, I think it gets you there pretty easily.
John Pryor, great to catch up with you. George Parham, always a pleasure. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues. I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the Idaho Student Murders, a case built on circumstantial evidence, DNA, video surveillance, and digital forensics. Will it be enough to send the suspect to death row? Here's the story. 4 students were brutally murdered in their home near the University of Idaho. Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana taken away so young. And now their accused killer has been charged and is preparing for trial as prosecutors seek the death penalty. It's the case the nation is waiting to see and waiting for justice. But what is the evidence in the case? What is the prosecution's theory? And is there any way to figure out what was going on inside the mind of the killer? Before the trial happens, there are still many questions to answer in this true crime tragedy. Now, some of the information and evidence in the case has been released through various affidavits, and I have one here that I want you to take a look at, which talks about the lead up to the murders, okay? Video obtained from the King Road neighborhood showed multiple sightings of the suspect vehicle 1 starting at 3:29 a.m. and ending at 4:20 a.m. The suspect vehicle, number 1, makes an initial 3 passes by the 1122 King Road residence and then leaves via Walenta Drive. Suspect vehicle 1, which is, again, is that white Hyundai Elantra, can be seen entering the area a 4th time at approximately 4:04 a.m. It can be seen driving eastbound on King Road, stopping and turning around in front of 500 Queen Road, number 52, and then driving back westbound on King Road. When the suspect vehicle 1 is in front of the King Road residence, it appeared to unsuccessfully attempt to park or turn around in the road. The vehicle then continued to the intersection of Queen and King Road, where it can be seen completing a 3-point turn and then driving eastbound again down Queen Road, a K-turn. I want you to take a look at this map. Gray Hughes, a guest we've had on many times here from Gray Hughes Investigates, believes this surveillance camera picked up the suspect vehicle turning around in front of 500 Queen Road, number 52, and then driving back westbound on King Road. Here he is explaining the significance and the timeline here of all of these surveillance videos and action of the suspect vehicle.
And look what time it is, 4:07 and 41 seconds or so. I think he parked at 4:08, all right? And then at 4:08, probably exits the vehicle sometime after that. And then at 4:20, it leaves at a high rate of speed.
Okay, so now when you put together the timing here of when the suspect vehicle shows up and when it leaves at a high rate of speed at 4:20, this is about a 14-minute window of time to commit the murders, according to the prosecution theory, right? So you have the car showing up, doing these turnarounds, and then showing up, and you have this window of time. So let's go through that window of time, and it brings me to my next question, which is, once that suspect car arrives, where did the killer go? There's the house that no longer stands there, but where did the killer go from the outside to the inside and then moving within that home? Joining me, former homicide detective, host of The Interview Room with Chris McDonough. Chris McDonough is with us, and private investigator with more than 20 years of experience. Even though he looks young, he's experienced, folks. Jason Jensen is with us as well. Let me ask you this. What are your theories here on how the suspect got into the house? Chris.
Well, Vinny, I've stood behind that house, and you've, as a great trial lawyer and prosecutor that you have been and are, I mean, I've been in this business since 1982. And I thought, okay, this guy sat behind this house, and then he slipped through that slider into that entrance. And we can get into what I believe happened in a couple of minutes here. But I think he spent a lot of time prior to even going in that house doing his homework outside. And also, I believe, peeping into that home. If you look in the bottom right-hand corner of that building that you just showed, there is a cylinder, concrete cylinder block. I've been talking about that cylinder block for quite some time, right there by the barbecue. You can see it at the bottom. I believe that was a perch of some sort, and that looks directly into one of the girls' room.
Wow. Jason Jensen, what are your thoughts here on how he got into the home? Do you agree that slider?
Yes, it really does appear that the entryway was through the kitchen sliding glass door, and he moved across that floor, which is the second floor, oddly enough. From the backside, it enters into the second floor of the residence, and then he just goes up a single flight of stairs to the upper floor, the third floor, where Maddie Mogan had her bedroom. And that's really where the initial assault occurred. So clearly that was the route, I believe, that Kohberger took.
Yeah, and it's it make common sense too, because when you go up behind the house and you go down that hill just a little bit, that's the level that you can get to. Let me put up some more from the affidavit, and then I'll get your full theories on what happened inside. This is from the affidavit. Dylan, known as DM, Dylan, the surviving roommate, stated she was awoken at approximately 4 a.m. by what she stated sounded like Kaylee Gonzalez playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms. A short time later, Dylan said she heard who she thought was Gonzalez say something to the effect of, "There's someone here." Dylan stated she opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Xana's room. Dylan then said she heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Dylan stated she opened her door for a third time after she heard the crying and saw the figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. The male walked past Dylan as she stood in a frozen shock phase. The male walked towards the back sliding glass door. This leads investigators to believe that the murderer left the scene. Let's take a look at the floor plan. If you take a look here on what Dylan saw, Kaylee and Maddie are in Maddie's room on the third floor. Dylan is on the second floor when she hears sounds coming from the third floor above her. A male figure dressed in black comes from the third floor past Dylan's room. Dylan hears sounds from Xana's room. It's okay, I'm going to help you. Dylan sees that male figure clad in black pass her and walk towards the sliding glass door, and you can see on that floor plan. Okay, time for you to lay out what you think happened. Jason, let me go to you first so you can continue with what you believe happened inside that home.
Well, I believe at that moment in time when he came down the stairs, he encountered Xana's boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, and so he had to engage and neutralize him if he was going to make his getaway. Next thing you know, that's when DM overhears Xana have a conversation with this perpetrator, and she's crying, and he says, it's okay, I'm going to help you. It all transpires as he's on his way out the door. That's when DM sees him in the main common area of the home as he's walking towards the back sliding glass door, his entryway. So he's making his escape through the same door that he entered.
Chris McDonough, what are your thoughts, and who do you believe is the voice behind it's going to be okay?
I agree with everything that was just said, and I think it could be obviously the perpetrator trying to lower the fear within his victim. However, in this particular case, we have to always remember that this guy had fantasized about this evening for quite some time, long before he entered that house. And I don't think he expected Ethan to be there. And I do believe as he came down from the third floor into the second floor that he took care of him first, and that it was a brutal fight. And then, of course, the other young lady there, Xana, I think he was trying to, calm her a little bit. But that, obviously that was impossible because of the fear factor going on here and the shock of probably witnessing her boyfriend being murdered right in front of her. And then I think he was out of gas going down, on the second floor, headed towards the back door, and that's probably why the other victim survived.
Yeah, that's a part that has always stuck with me, Jason, is the fact that DM Dylan, the surviving roommate, seems to be able to sort of see his face, describes those bushy eyebrows, yet he passes her by amazingly. I don't even know if she realized what had happened, what she was witnessing.
Right, and it may be a simple explanation that because it was late at night and the lights were out, maybe Kohberger did not see Dylan looking through a cracked open door. Otherwise, if he had, maybe he would have engaged her next. Or, like Chris just said, maybe he was out of gas and thought, well, I just better get out the door. Because next thing you know, as you described earlier, Vinny, the car is then spotted speeding away from the scene of the crime.
Jason Jensen, Chris McDonough staying with us. Still to come, who was the intended target?
We believe this was an isolated, targeted attack on our victims.
There are lots of cases that we'd like to look at. This show, Interview with the Killer, is ultimately about justice, and we hold their feet to the fire. You know what you did, right? I killed him. And I prayed to God. That's not really how God works, is it? We have begun in the hopes that the audience likes this show. We'll keep doing it.
Interview with a Killer, new season coming in 2025, only on Court TV.
The Latah County coroners conducted autopsies, and detectives have been provided with the results of those autopsies. We know that the autopsies confirmed the identity of the 4 victims, determined the cause and manner of death as homicide by stabbing, and determined that it was likely all 4 victims who were asleep during the attack. Some of the victims had defensive wounds. and each victim was stabbed multiple times.
That was part of this story that just like grabbed everyone. 4 different people, 4 young lives, all taken in this mass murder that took place inside this house of these like really good kids who were living their best lives. But with 4 victims here, and you wonder, like, you try to go inside the mind of the killer. That brings us to our next question in this investigation. Who was the intended target? Was it 1? Was it 2? Was it 3? Was it all 4? Who was the intended target when that killer entered that home that night? Still with us, former homicide detective Chris McDonough and private investigator Jason Jensen. I want to put this up. This is from CBS News. Interesting. A report from CBS News. Kaylee Gonzalez's parents, Steve and Christy, believe they have proof of a connection. They say they discovered digital evidence they say showed a tie of the accused killer to 2 of the victims. The Gonzalez family provided screenshots of an Instagram account they believe belonged to the accused killer. Those screenshots include what they say is the accused killer's Instagram profile and a list of people he was following, including Maddie and Kaylee. 48 Hours has not been able to confirm the authenticity of this account. But Chris McDonough, what do you think about the intended target here?
Well, what I will tell you, I've seen that information that you just talked about, Vinny, from the family. They've shown it to me. And I don't want to say that his intention was a single particular target. I think he spent enough time surveilling that house in what we would call pre-incident behavior, where I believe all 5 of those girls were in danger from this perpetrator. Evident of the fact that he went upstairs, he attacks the 2 who were sleeping, and then when he comes downstairs, what Steve had mentioned earlier, I don't think he anticipated Ethan being there. And then, of course, you know, he attacks those 2 victims, and then when he comes downstairs, you know, he's just, like I said a moment ago, I just think he's spent. The fantasy is not going the way he anticipated it to go. So like Ted Bundy, who attacked the 8 nurses back in the day, or the sorority house in Florida, he took his time. He went room to room, victim to victim. I believe Kohberger probably had the same intent to specifically pick off each girl within inside of that building.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about Ted Bundy, because that's the part of the country where he was from, right? Up in the Pacific Northwest initially, before he got caught down in Florida. Jason Jensen, I want to show you something, which is some video from outside the home that is no longer there. But when you take a look at the video of that home from the outside and you look upstairs, you can see the M from Maddie's room. So if you were sort of poking around outside that night, you are going to be able to know whose room is whose, perhaps. And if they're coming home late at night, you'd be able to see when the light is on and when the light goes off, etc., from that back side of the parking lot. What are your thoughts, Jason, about who the intended target was in this attack?
If we do have reason to believe that Kohberger was following the 2 girls on Instagram and thereby knew Maddie's name began with the letter M, the logical conclusion was that bedroom was his target, that he was, you know, that was his destination. That being said, given the fact that he was documented from his digital history from his phone being in that vicinity at least 12 other occasions, clearly indicates to me that he was stalking the girls, stalking the house, and then by the time he got the bravery to go into the home, apparently to commit a sexual assault, his intended target was to go to that bedroom.
I want to take a look at this as well. This is from People magazine. The man accused of killing the 4 University of Idaho students allegedly had pictures of one of the female victims on his phone. A source familiar with the investigation tells People. A phone that belonged to the suspect was collected after his arrest. According to the source, authorities found pictures of the victim on the device. The source did not specify whether they were photos he had taken of her or if they were downloaded from her social media. He had more than one picture of her, the source says. It was clear that he was paying attention to her. Another little fact here, Chris, and I want your response to that, is that Kaylee had graduated early, and she had just purchased this new car, was showing it to everyone, and was getting ready to go to Texas. So I don't know if she was suspected to, if you would have known that she would have been there that night. So what are your thoughts if this turns out to be true, that he's got photos of one person from inside that home on his phone?
Yeah, you know, and that's a great point, Vinny. I mean, but also, remember, there's also evidence in one of the search warrants. They had an intrusion expert from the Secret Service who basically went through some laptops. I believe one of them was Madison's. And in there, they wanted to see if, in fact, this guy had the capability to sit outside of the house and tap into their Wi-Fi networks and kind of monitor him from that way. Remember, his background was also, you know, this technology piece of his personality, where he wanted to even teach the cops. So it wouldn't surprise me if he had downloaded additional information from the victims. But I still, in my heart, go back to, I think Madison was at the top floor, and Maddie, and that his intent, he went right into that third floor, right up to that third floor. And I personally believe he was going to work his way all the way down to the bottom. I really believe that his intent that night just, you know, his fantasy just ran out, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, by the time you're on victim number 4, all the adrenaline and everything else that's going on here, and we can't forget, Jason Jensen, that a huge piece of evidence is left upstairs, which I think speaks to the intensity of what's happening and where his mind is at that moment.
Oh, exactly. To leave the sheath of a knife, the obvious weapon used to kill these 4 was stabbing. So to leave the sheath behind with his fingerprint on it is pretty direct evidence that he was the one that was in the room, as long as it can be introduced properly and forensically. He's cooked.
Absolutely. Jason Jensen, Chris McDonough, appreciate all your time and your insight. We'll see you again soon. If this defendant was planning the perfect murder, he made 2 major mistakes. The first was obviously leaving the knife sheath with his DNA on it at the crime scene. This is what I would call extremely strong circumstantial evidence. The second mistake was bringing his phone with him the night of the murder. That digital footprint fits perfectly with the surveillance video. But the question remains, will it be enough for the jury? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.